A waddling penguin shocks officers when it enters their station. What the little visitor reveals next sends ripples across the community. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The morning sun beat down on San Diego's coastline as beachgoers stopped in their tracks. Phones raised to capture an unusual sight. A small penguin, roughly 2 feet tall, determinedly dragged a blue and white striped beach bag across the sand. The bag was nearly as big as he was, creating a long groove in the sand behind him. Some onlookers chuckled, others pointed, but most just stared in confusion at the sight of a penguin on a California beach. The penguin, known as Benny to the local aquarium staff, moved with surprising purpose. His flippers gripped the bag's handles tightly as he waddled forward, occasionally stopping to readjust his grip. The bag seemed heavy, its contents shifting with each movement, but Benny remained focused on his destination, the local police precinct just off the boardwalk. The glass doors of the precinct posed the first real challenge. Benny stood before them, head tilted to one side, considering his options. The automatic sensor was too high to detect his small frame. After a moment's contemplation, he began tapping his beak against the glass in a steady rhythm. Inside, Officer Dave Martinez was the first to notice the peculiar visitor. He blinked hard, certain the morning coffee hadn't quite kicked in yet. "Hey, Captain Reynolds," he called out, voice uncertain. "You might want to see this." Captain Mark Reynolds emerged from his office, coffee mug in hand, to find his entire morning shift staff gathered at the front windows. The scene before him made him question if someone had spiked the break room coffee pot. A penguin, an actual penguin, was requesting entry to his precinct. "Someone want to explain this?" Reynolds asked, looking around at his equally bewildered officers. Officer Lisa Chin stepped forward. "Sir, I recognize him from the aquarium. That's Benny. He's something of a local celebrity, known for being unusually intelligent. But he's never done anything like this before." Reynolds rubbed his temples. "Well, don't just stand there. Let him in." The moment the doors opened, Benny marched straight to Reynolds' desk, dragging the beach bag behind him. The entire precinct watched in stunned silence as the penguin positioned the bag directly in front of the captain's feet and stepped back, as if presenting evidence. Reynolds crouched down, examining the bag without touching it. "Chun, give me gloves." "Martinez, start recording. Whatever this is, we're doing this by the book, even if our witness is a penguin." The bag was standard beach fare, worn fabric, salt-stained straps, and a faded logo from a local surf shop. But its contents told a different story. Reynolds carefully began removing items. A custom-made wallet with initials MJ, a set of house keys with a distinctive surfboard keychain, a smartphone in a waterproof case, and several personal documents. "Run these initials through the system," Reynolds ordered, holding up the wallet. Officer Chin returned moments later, her expression serious. "Sir, these belong to the Johnson family. They filed a report 3 days ago. Home invasion. The perpetrators took more than just valuables. They stole items of personal significance." The family was pretty shaken up. Reynolds looked at Benny, who stood at attention, flippers at his sides. The penguin's eyes seemed to hold an intelligence that made the captain uncomfortable. This wasn't just a random occurrence. Somehow, this penguin had found evidence in a current investigation and brought it directly to them. "All right," Reynolds announced to his team, "I want this bag processed for prints. Document everything. And someone contact the Johnsons. Tell them we may have recovered some of their belongings." He paused, looking at Benny again. "And get someone from the aquarium down here. I want to know everything about our new witness." The precinct burst into activity, but Benny remained still, watching the proceedings with what could only be described as satisfaction. Something about this case was different, and everyone in the room could feel it. They just didn't know yet how different it would become. Officer Chin approached Benny with a small bowl of water, placing it near him. "I don't know how you did this," she said quietly, "but thank you." Benny accepted the water with a gentle nod, while continuing to observe the evidence processing with remarkable attention. The morning sun now streamed through the precinct windows, illuminating an unprecedented scene. A full police force mobilized around evidence delivered by a penguin. It was just the beginning of what would become one of San Diego's most unusual cases. The Johnson family arrived at the precinct within the hour. Michael and Sarah Johnson, along with their children Emma, 10, and Lucas, 8. Their expressions shifted from hopeful to bewildered as Captain Reynolds explained the unusual circumstances surrounding their recovered belongings. "A penguin found our stuff?" Lucas repeated, his eyes wide with excitement. Unlike his parents, who exchanged skeptical glances, the boy seemed completely accepting of this extraordinary turn of events. Sarah Johnson carefully examined each item from the beach bag, her hands trembling slightly. "These are definitely ours," she confirmed, holding up the wallet and keys. "But there's still so much missing. The jewelry box that belonged to my grandmother, our laptops, and..." She paused, glancing at her children, "other valuable items." Michael Johnson, a well-known local surfing instructor, ran his hand through his salt-bleached hair. "The break-in happened while we were at my evening surf class. We came home to find everything ransacked. The kids were devastated." He placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "It's not just about the stuff, it's about feeling safe in our own home." Officer Lisa Chun observed from her desk, mechanically filling out paperwork while watching the family's interaction with Benny, who had positioned himself near the children. The penguin's behavior was remarkably gentle, allowing Emma to pat his head while maintaining a dignified posture that seemed almost professional. Lisa had been struggling since her last major case, a series of beach house burglaries that remained unsolved despite months of investigation. The similarities to the Johnson case were hard to ignore, and the weight of that failure pressed heavily on her shoulders. But something about watching Benny's interaction with the family sparked a forgotten sense of purpose. The items in the bag were dry, Lisa noted suddenly, standing up. Despite being in a beach bag, everything was completely dry and sand-free. That means they were stored somewhere protected before being moved. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "Good catch, Shun. Mr. Johnson, you mentioned you teach surfing. Where exactly do you hold your classes?" "Sunset Point, mainly. It's got the best breaks for beginners, and there's a whole community of surfers there. We look out for each other, you know?" Michael's face darkened. "Or at least I thought we did." As the adults discussed the case, Benny waddled over to the evidence table where the beach bag lay. With surprising dexterity, he used his beak to point at something caught in the bag zipper, a small piece of orange fabric with a distinctive pattern. "Wait," Michael said, leaning in for a closer look. "I know that pattern. It's from the rental kiosks at Sunset Point. All their equipment has that same orange safety marking." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. The rental kiosks were a popular spot, not just for tourists, but for the entire surfing community. A perfect place to observe potential targets without arousing suspicion. "Chun, take point O." "In this," Reynolds ordered, recognizing the renewed energy in his officer's demeanor. "Work with Mr. Johnson. Find out who has access to those kiosks, who works there, everything." Emma, who had been quietly watching Benny, spoke up. "He's like a detective," she said, smiling at the penguin. "Like in my books, but better because he's real." The comment drew a small laugh from the adults, breaking the tension. Even Lisa found herself smiling, especially when Benny responded to the girl's observation with what could only be described as a dignified bow. "We'll need to interview the staff at Sunset Point," Lisa announced, already planning her approach. "Mr. Johnson, would you be willing to come with us? Your presence might help make it seem more casual, less official." "Of course," Michael agreed. "I know most of the regulars there. And honestly, I'd like to know who's been targeting our community." As the Johnsons prepared to leave, Lucas gave Benny a final pat. "Thank you for finding our stuff," he said solemnly. The penguin gently touched his beak to the boy's hand in response, a gesture so human-like it caught everyone off guard. Sarah gathered her children, holding the recovered belongings close. "We really are grateful," she told Reynolds. "Not just for finding these things, but for taking this seriously. When you've been robbed, it's the violation of trust that hurts the most." Reynolds watched as Lisa organized her notes, Benny still at attention nearby. "Oh, we're taking this very seriously, Mrs. Johnson. And something tells me this is just the beginning." The captain's words proved more prophetic than he knew. As the family left the precinct, Benny was already waddling toward the door, his posture making it clear he intended to be part of the investigation at Sunset Point. Somehow, a penguin had not only brought them their first real lead in weeks, but had also managed to reignite a spark in one of his best officers. "Chen," Reynolds called out, "keep an eye on our new friend. Something tells me he knows more than he's showing." Lisa nodded, gathering her badge and notebook. For the first time in months, she felt the familiar thrill of a case breaking open. And all it took was a penguin with a beach bag to make it happen. Sunset Point buzzed with typical afternoon activity as Lisa's unmarked police car pulled into the parking lot. Benny sat in the back seat, despite Reynolds' protests about department regulations, while Michael Johnson rode shotgun. The rental kiosks formed a colorful line along the boardwalk, their orange-trimmed awnings matching the fabric fragment found in the beach bag. "There are usually 3 kiosks operating this time of year," Michael explained, surveying the area. "Each runs independently, but they all use the same supplier for equipment. That's why they have matching safety markers." Lisa noticed Benny's sudden alertness as they approached the central kiosk. The penguin's attention fixed on 2 men engaged in what appeared to be a casual conversation near the surfboard racks. One wore the standard orange vest of the rental staff, while the other was dressed in expensive beachwear that seemed out of place among the regular surfers. "That's Pete Miller in the vest," Michael said quietly. "Been working here about 6 months. The other guy, I've seen him around, but he's not a regular." Lisa pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages while observing the interaction. The men's body language suggested more than a routine customer exchange. Heads close together, frequent glances around, the subtle exchange of what looked like a piece of paper. "Stay here," Lisa instructed Michael, then reconsidered as Benny already waddled out of the car. "Actually follow us, but keep your distance. Act natural." They approached the kiosk, with Benny taking an unexpectedly strategic route behind the surfboard racks. Lisa noted how the penguin's presence, while unusual, didn't attract undue attention. The locals had grown accustomed to seeing him around the beach. "Afternoon," Lisa called out, adopting a tourist casual tone. "Looking to rent some boards." Pete straightened immediately, while his companion took a subtle step back. "Sure thing. We've got a great selection. How many you need?" As Lisa engaged Pete in conversation about rental rates, Benny positioned himself near the well-dressed stranger, who grew increasingly uncomfortable with the penguin's unblinking stare. "Hey, isn't that the Johnson's friend?" Pete asked suddenly, recognizing Michael hanging back near the cars. The well-dressed man's head snapped up at the name. Everything happened in quick succession after that. The stranger bolted, shoving past a rack of swimwear. Pete made a move to follow, but Lisa's quick police "Don't move!" froze him in place. The chase was on. The suspect weaved through beachgoers, scattering a volleyball game. Lisa pursued, her feet sliding in the soft sand, while Benny, to everyone's surprise, took a parallel route along the harder-packed sand near the water. The fugitive glanced back, clearly not expecting to see a penguin among his pursuers. This moment of distraction proved costly as he stumbled on a child's abandoned sand castle. Lisa closed the distance, but the man regained his footing and veered toward the pier's supports. Benny, showing remarkable awareness of the situation, cut through the incoming tide. The cool water seemed to energize him, his awkward beach waddle transforming into streamlined movement through the shallows. The suspect reached the pier's edge, ready to disappear into the maze of supports and shadows. Lisa felt the familiar frustration of a perp about to slip away, until Benny emerged from the water directly in his path. The man's surprised yelp drew attention from nearby beachgoers. He backpedaled, slipping on the wet sand, and Lisa seized the moment. She closed the final distance, but her foot caught on a piece of driftwood. As she stumbled forward, Benny positioned himself perfectly, providing an unexpected brace that helped her regain balance. "Thanks, partner," Lisa gasped, securing the suspect's hands behind his back. The penguin responded with what could only be described as a professional nod. Back at the rental kiosk, Pete had wisely remained in place, Michael keeping a careful eye on him. Other officers arrived to secure the scene, while beachgoers gathered at a safe distance, phones recording the unusual scene of a penguin assisting in an arrest. "The guy's name is Marcus Webb," Lisa reported to Reynolds over the phone. Found a notebook on him with what looks like surveillance notes. Times, addresses, routines. Pete's apparently been feeding him information about regular customers, especially the ones who mentioned being away from home. Reynolds' voice crackled through the speaker. "Good work, Chen. Both of you," he added, and Lisa could hear the slight disbelief in his tone at having to acknowledge a penguin as part of the arrest. As the suspects were led away, Lisa noticed Benny standing at the water's edge, alertly watching the pier. His posture suggested the case wasn't closed. There was more to discover. The chase had revealed not just a criminal operation, but also cemented an unexpected partnership. Somehow, a penguin had become her most reliable backup, and Lisa found she was completely okay with that. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the beach as crime scene techs processed the kiosk. Benny remained close to Lisa, both of them watching the waves with the shared awareness that this was just the beginning of a much larger investigation. Back at the precinct, the investigation room buzzed with activity. Evidence boards displayed photos of the suspects, rental kiosk documentation, and a growing web of connections. Captain Reynolds stood before the assembled team, with Lisa and Benny, now sporting a makeshift honorary badge attached to a water-resistant band at the forefront. "Ontario Marcus Webb has a record," Reynolds announced, tapping a mugshot on the board. "Small-time stuff until now, pickpocketing minor cons. But these burglaries show a level of organization that suggests he's working with a larger group." Lisa spread out surveillance photos on the table. The rental kiosks gave them perfect cover. Pete Miller admitted to passing information about at least 12 families over the past 3 months. They specifically targeted people taking surf lessons or renting equipment long-term, guaranteed windows of time when houses would be empty. Benny waddled to the map mounted on the wall, using his beak to tap a specific location along the coastline. The area he indicated showed a series of beach caves, typically submerged during high tide, but accessible during specific times of day. Those caves were mapped last year during a coastal survey. Officer Martinez contributed, pulling up the relevant files. Some extend quite far back, perfect for storing stolen goods until they can be moved. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need to plan a careful sweep. If there's an organized group operating out of there, they'll have lookouts. One wrong move, and they'll clear everything out before we can get evidence." The briefing was interrupted by Michael Johnson's arrival. He'd been asked to come in to provide additional information about the surfing community, but his expression suggested he brought more than just background details. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I've been talking with other instructors and families. This goes deeper than we thought. During tough times, medical emergencies, financial crises, our community has always come together. We store equipment for each other, watch each other's houses, support each other's businesses. These thieves, they didn't just steal stuff, they used our trust against us." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about recovered property anymore. It was about restoring a community's sense of security. Lisa noticed Benny's reaction to Michael's words. The penguin's usual alert stance softened, and he moved closer to the surf instructor in what appeared to be a gesture of solidarity. "Tell us more about how the community operates," Reynolds encouraged, recognizing the value of understanding the social dynamics they were dealing with. Michael pulled up a chair. "Take the recent hospital fundraiser for Tommy Garcia's kid. Everyone pitched in equipment rentals, lesson vouchers, even opened their homes to out-of-town family members coming for support. Now I'm wondering if the thieves used that information too." "They did," Lisa confirmed, checking her notes. 3 of the burglaries coincided with families attending hospital visits or fundraising events. They knew exactly when people would be gone and for how long. Benny had moved to the evidence table, methodically examining photos of recovered items. He stopped at an image of a distinctive surfboard reported stolen 2 weeks ago, tapping it insistently with his beak. "That's Brian Meyer's board," Michael identified. "Custom design, one of a kind. He reported it stolen during his daughter's surgery day." He paused, realization dawning. "Wait, I saw that board yesterday, being loaded into a van near the South Pier. I thought Brian had found it." Reynolds straightened. "We need to move on this. If they're already moving the larger items, they might be preparing to clear out their entire operation." Lisa began outlining a preliminary strategy on the whiteboard. The caves Benny identified are accessible for about 4 hours during low tide. According to the tide charts, we have a window tomorrow afternoon. We'll need plainclothes officers on the beach, water surveillance, and backup units ready to move in. I can help, Michael offered. Tomorrow's my usual lesson time. Nothing would look more natural than a surf instructor with a group of students. Several other instructors old volunteer too, give you extra eyes on the beach without raising suspicion. Benny, who had been studying the tide charts with surprising comprehension, waddled to the center of the room. His presence had somehow become both natural and essential to their planning sessions. The penguin had proven himself not just as a mascot, but as a legitimate member of the investigative team. Reynolds surveyed the room, taking in the unusual assembly of police officers, a surf instructor, and a penguin detective. All right, let's make this official. Chun, you'll coordinate with the surf community volunteers. Martinez, get tactical ready for cave surveillance. And Benny, he paused, still adjusting to addressing a penguin in an operational briefing. Keep doing whatever it is you're doing. It's working. As the team dispersed to prepare for the operation, Lisa caught Benny studying the evidence board one last time. There was something reassuring about his methodical attention to detail, his unwavering focus on justice. In a case that challenged their normal procedures at every turn, having a penguin as a partner had somehow become the most natural thing in the world. The setting sun cast long shadows through the precinct windows, highlighting the scattered evidence photos and maps. Tomorrow would test their unusual alliance, but for now, the team shared a quiet confidence. They had solid intel, community support, and a penguin detective who had yet to lead them wrong. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect for beach activities and perfect for surveillance. While the tactical team made final preparations, Benny spent time on the beach, maintaining his cover as the local aquarium's beloved resident. Children built sandcastles around him, their parents snapping photos of the sociable penguin. To casual observers, it was just another day of Benny's famous beach visits. None of them suspected that his playful waddles were carefully calculated movements, mapping the terrain for the upcoming operation. He's really something else, Lisa remarked to Reynolds, watching from their unmarked car as Benny expertly positioned himself to monitor the cave entrance while appearing to pose for tourist photos. Look how he's using those kids' activities to establish sight lines across the beach. Reynolds sipped his coffee, still adjusting to having a penguin as one of his most effective operatives. Just remember, when we write this report, we're going to have to explain why we took tactical direction from a flightless bird. Michael Johnson and 3 other surf instructors had spread out along the beach, their regular lessons providing perfect coverage of the target area. Each group of students unknowingly formed part of their surveillance network, their presence making any unusual activity near the caves more noticeable. Lisa's radio crackled. Movement at the south entrance. 2 subjects carrying diving gear. Martinez's voice was low, but clear from his position in the lifeguard tower. Benny, who had been entertaining a group of children by waddling through their sandcastle moat, suddenly stood at attention. His head turned slightly toward the caves, though he maintained his playful demeanor. Through binoculars, Lisa observed 2 men in wetsuits approaching the cave entrance, their movements casual but purposeful. They carried standard diving equipment, but something about their gear seemed off. Those tanks are too small for extended diving, Michael commented through his radio, teaching his class while keeping an eye on the situation. They're just for show. Benny had gradually moved his children's game closer to the cave area, the kids delightedly following their penguin playmate. His position now gave them a clear view of anyone entering or exiting the cave system. Sir, Lisa said suddenly, look at the rental kiosk nearest the caves. Reynolds focused his binoculars on the indicated spot. A woman in expensive beachwear was SPE, aching with a new kiosk attendant, but her attention kept drifting to the cave entrance. Spot her, he concluded. She's watching for us. Benny's next move was brilliantly simple. He led his young followers in a game of follow the penguin that just happened to take them past the kiosk. The woman, trying to maintain her cover, had to step aside for the children, momentarily losing sight of the cave entrance. "Everyone hold positions," Reynolds ordered through the radio. "Wait for visual confirmation of the stolen goods before we move in." The morning stretched on, the beach growing busier with regular visitors. Benny continued his performance, each playful interaction carefully calculated to maintain surveillance while appearing completely natural. The tactical team, disguised as beachgoers, had positioned themselves strategically around the area. They knew they'd only get one chance at this. If the thieves realized they were under surveillance, months of stolen property might disappear into the ocean. Around noon, Benny's behavior shifted subtly. He stood straighter, his attention focused on the cave entrance while still pretending to play with the children. The tide was beginning to rise, which meant if the thieves were storing goods in the caves, they'd need to move them soon. Two more subjects approaching from the north, Martinez reported, carrying waterproof bags. Lisa watched as Benny orchestrated his group of young followers into building a massive sandcastle, positioned perfectly to block the spotters' view of a crucial section of beach. The Penguins' tactical understanding of the situation was uncanny. "Stand by," Reynolds commanded, seeing the pieces falling into place. "Wait for my signal." The tension mounted as the new arrivals converged with the first two subjects near the cave entrance. They moved with the casual confidence of people who believed their cover was solid, unaware that their every move was being watched by a network of surf instructors, disguised officers, and one very observant penguin. Benny's next signal was clear to the team, but invisible to anyone else. He simply shook off some water, sending his young friends into a fit of giggles. But the team knew the suspects were bringing out the goods. "Everyone ready," Reynolds spoke quietly into his radio. "Wait for visual confirmation before moving in. Remember, we need to catch them with the stolen property." The beach scene held its breath. Tourists sunbathing, children playing, surf lessons continuing, all while an invisible net tightened around the cave entrance. And at the center of it all, a penguin detective continued his masterful performance, ready to help spring the trap that would restore justice to his adopted community. The rising tide began to lap at the cave entrance, and everyone knew the next few moments would determine whether their unusual operation would succeed or fail. Benny stood ready, his young friends still building sandcastles, unaware they were part of one of the most unique police operations in San Diego history. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more complicated. The annual Beach Beats Festival was in full swing just north of their surveillance area, with music and crowds providing both cover and potential complications for their operation. "Status update," Reynolds commanded through the radio, watching as festival goers began drifting closer to their target zone. For subjects now visible at cave entrance, Martinez reported from his elevated position. "They're using waterproof cases. Wait, I can see what looks like jewelry boxes and electronics through the clear sections." Lisa observed as Benny subtly redirected his young followers' sandcastle construction, creating a natural barrier between the festival crowd and the cave area. The Penguins' understanding of crowd dynamics was remarkable. The woman from the kiosk, their suspected spotter, had moved closer to the cave entrance, ostensibly taking photos of the festival, but clearly signaling to the men emerging from the caves. She froze momentarily when she spotted Michael Johnson teaching nearby, then quickly typed something on her phone. "Movement at the north entrance," Lisa reported, watching through her binoculars. "They're speeding up their extraction. They must have made us." Reynolds was about to order the team to move when the situation suddenly became more complicated. A group of children from the festival, faces painted and carrying beach toys, wandered into the operational zone, drawn by the sight of Benny and his sandcastle crew. The thieves paused their activities, trying to maintain their casual appearance while clearly anxious to move their goods. The spotter began walking toward the children, apparently planning to direct them away from the area. That's when Benny made his move. With perfect timing, he waddled directly between the approaching spotter and the children, staging an impromptu performance that drew delighted squeals from the kids and attracted even more attention. "He's boxing them in," Lisa realized. They can't move the goods with this many witnesses, but they can't wait much longer with the tide rising. The thieves' frustration was visible now. One made a subtle gesture toward the festival crowd, and Lisa spotted something that made her blood run cold. the outline of a weapon under his wetsuit. "Armed suspect confirmed," she radioed. "We need to move before civilians get caught in the middle." Reynolds was about to give the order when Benny took control of the situation. The Penguins suddenly orchestrated a game of chase, leading both groups of children in a wide circle that effectively created a barrier of witnesses between the armed suspect and the festival crowd. "Look at that," Martinez commented from his position. "The Penguins got better tactical awareness than half our rookie class." The thieves were now effectively trapped, unable to reach their vehicle without crossing through dozens of witnesses, unable to return to the caves as the tide rose, and unable to use force without drawing immediate attention. "All units, prepare to move," Reynolds commanded. "On my mark." But before he could give the signal, one of the thieves made a desperate decision. He grabbed a waterproof case and started moving toward the children, apparently hoping to use them as cover for his escape. What happened next would be talked about in the precinct for years to come. Benny, seeing the threat to his young friends, abandoned all pretense of playing. He positioned himself directly in the thief's path, drawing himself up to his full height, which, while not particularly impressive in human terms, carried an unmistakable message of determination. The sight of a penguin clearly challenging him caused the thief to hesitate, drawing attention from nearby beachgoers. Phones came out, recording what they thought was a cute animal interaction, but was actually a tactical standoff. "Moving now," Reynolds ordered, and the beach erupted into action. Disguised officers emerged from the crowd. Surf instructors helped create a barrier keeping civilians back, and Lisa led the primary arrest team toward the cave entrance. The thieves, realizing they were surrounded and now the center of attention, had nowhere to go. The spotter tried to slip away in the confusion, but found her path blocked by Benny, who had somehow anticipated her escape route. She nearly tripped over him, sending her phone flying, a phone that would later prove to contain detailed records of their operation. "Police! Everyone down!" Lisa's voice carried over the festival music as she moved in with her team. The arrests were swift and professional, but it was Benny who became the focus of the gathering crowd's attention. He stood guard over the recovered property, his honorary badge glinting in the sun, while children cheered for their penguin protector. As the suspects were led away and evidence was secured, Reynolds found himself standing next to his most unusual team member. "Good work," he said, feeling only slightly ridiculous addressing a penguin. "Though we're going to have to figure out how to write this up." Benny merely nodded, his attention already focused on the caves where Martinez's team was documenting the stolen property. His posture suggested that while this was a significant victory, there were still unanswered questions. The leader of this operation hadn't been among those arrested, and Benny's behavior indicated he knew there was more to uncover. The festival music played on as the crime scene was processed, creating a surreal backdrop to one of the most unusual operations in the department's history. And at the center of it all stood a penguin who had just proven himself to be more than just a mascot. He was a true guardian of his adopted community. Back at the precinct, the evidence room overflowed with recovered property from the cave operation. Lisa and her team worked methodically, cataloging items while trying to piece together the bigger picture. Benny moved between the evidence tables with purpose, seeming to pay particular attention to high-end electronics and custom surf gear. 6 arrests total, Reynolds announced, entering with a fresh case file. The 4 at the cave, the spotter, and our friend Pete from the rental kiosk. But something's not adding up. Lisa looked up from her inventory list. The organization level is too sophisticated for this crew. Webb's record shows petty crime, and none of the others have any significant history. They're not masterminds. Exactly, Reynolds agreed, spreading photographs across a clear section of table. The operation had professional planning, inside information about security systems, and a distribution network for the stolen goods. These guys were just the grab team. Benny waddled to the case board, where photos of the suspects were connected by red strings. He tapped his beak deliberately at the empty space above their photos, where a leader's picture should be. "The phones we recovered are clean," Martinez reported, joining them with his laptop. "Too clean. Someone wiped them remotely as soon as the arrest started. We're dealing with someone who knows police procedures." Lisa felt the familiar weight of frustration settling in. They had stopped the immediate threat, recovered stolen property, but the real perpetrator remained at large. She watched as Benny examined a recovered laptop, his attention focused on a small logo sticker partially obscured by scratches. "Hold on." She moved closer. "That's not damage from the theft. Someone deliberately tried to hide this mark." She carefully photographed the partial logo. "Can we enhance this?" Martinez took the camera, uploading the image to his computer. "It's a corporate asset tag. High-end tech company. Looks like Coastal Dynamic Systems." "The security consulting firm?" Reynolds asked sharply. "They do installations for half the beachfront properties in the area." The pieces started falling into place. Lisa pulled up property records on her computer. "Look at this." In the past year, Coastal Dynamics installed new security systems in over 80% of the homes that were hit. They would have had access to everything: layouts, schedules, bypass codes. Benny's reaction confirmed their suspicion. The Penguin moved quickly to the map, indicating several locations along the coast. All homes with Coastal Dynamics security systems that hadn't been robbed. "They're not random targets," Lisa realized. "They're choosing specific homes and avoiding others." "But why?" Reynolds picked up his phone. "Let me call Judge Martinez for a warrant. We need to look at Coastal Dynamics employee records and installation schedules." But before he could dial, Benny began tapping insistently at a photo from the evidence pile. A framed family picture recovered from one of the waterproof cases. In it, A.G. Rope stood on a yacht, celebrating what appeared to be a corporate event. "Wait." Lisa moved closer, examining the faces. "That's Sarah Johnson's grandmother in the background, the one whose jewelry box was stolen." She looked up at Reynolds. "This isn't just about theft. It's personal." Martinez quickly ran facial recognition on the other people in the photo. "Got a hit." The man in the center is Victor Reeves, former CEO of Coastal Dynamics. Left the company 3 years ago after a disputed merger. "Check the connection to the Johnson family," Reynolds ordered, his instincts firing. Minutes later, they had their answer. Sarah Johnson's grandmother was one of the original investors in Coastal Dynamics, Martinez reported. She sided against Reeves in the merger vote. Most of the other burglary victims were also connected to that merger: board members, major shareholders, their families. "He's using his old company's security systems to take revenge," Lisa concluded. "The beach gang is just a cover, making it look like random crime instead of targeted attacks." Benny's attention had shifted to the tide charts posted on the wall. His behavior suggested urgency. Something was happening soon. "There's a corporate retreat this weekend," Martinez found scrolling through social media posts. "Annual gathering of Coastal Dynamics' current leadership. Being held at the Pacific Crest Hotel." Lisa finished watching Benny's reaction. "Right on the beach. Perfect target if someone wanted to make a statement." Reynolds reached for his phone again, but this time to call for backup. "If Reeves is planning something at that retreat, we need to move fast. But we need proof to connect him to the burglaries first." Lisa looked at Benny, who was already moving toward the door with determination. "I think our detective has an idea where to find that proof." The sun was setting outside the precinct, casting long shadows across the evidence room. They had stopped one crime ring only to uncover a larger conspiracy. But as Lisa watched Benny studying the hotel's location on the map, she knew they weren't finished. The Penguin's posture spoke of certainty. He knew where the final pieces of this puzzle would be found. "All right," Reynolds addressed his team. "Let's find out what our friend here knows. But this time we do it by the book. No more improvising on the beach." Benny's slight head tilt suggested he might have other ideas about that last part. The Pacific Crest Hotel's abandoned service building stood dark against the evening sky. Once used for storage and maintenance, it had been scheduled for demolition after the hotel's recent renovation. Lisa's unmarked car pulled up quietly, lights off, about a block away. "According to the construction permits, this building's been empty for months," Martinez said, checking his tablet. "But utility records show power usage spiked last week." Benny, in the back seat, was unusually still, his attention fixed on a faint light visible through one of the building's basement windows. They had followed his lead here after he'd repeatedly indicated the hotel's location on their maps. Somehow knowing this would be significant. Security cameras show Reeves accessed the hotel grounds 3 times this week using an old maintenance code, Lisa reported. He's still listed as a system consultant. Probably kept his credentials active after leaving the company. Reynolds' voice crackled through their radios. Remember, we're here to gather evidence only. We need probable cause for a warrant before we can move on the retreat tomorrow. Lisa watched as Benny studied the building's layout on Martinez's tablet, his behavior suggesting he was formulating a plan. The Penguin's previous activities had demonstrated an uncanny understanding of surveillance and evidence gathering. Movement at the southeast corner, Martinez whispered, pointing to a figure moving between shadows. Looks like our boy Pete wasn't the NLY1 feeding information to Reeves. That's a hotel security guard. The guard made his way to the service building, unlocked a side door, and disappeared inside. Moments later, the basement light flickered, a signal. We need to get closer, Lisa decided. Benny, you should stay. But the Penguin was already out of the car, moving with surprising stealth toward a storm drain that ran alongside the building. His dark feathers blended perfectly with the shadows. Did he just? Martinez started. Don't say it. Lisa sighed, realizing their most professional team member was technically a bird who didn't need a warrant for observation. Let's just maintain position and see what he does. Benny's approach was masterful. Using the storm drain as cover, he made his way to the basement window. The Penguin's natural waddling gait disappeared entirely as he moved with the precision of a trained operative. Through their binoculars, Lisa and Martinez watched as Benny positioned himself below the window ledge. Voices drifted up from inside. Everything's set for tomorrow. Security codes will malfunction during the keynote speech. With all the executives trapped in the conference room, and the evidence from the beach operation already scrubbed, they'll never connect it back to us. Those petty thieves will take the fall. Lisa's radio buzzed softly. All units, stand by. Our friend is using his phone to record. Primary suspect confirmed on premises. Sure enough, through their binoculars, they could see Reeves himself inside the basement, surrounded by maps and electronics. On a wall behind him, photos and documents detailed the previous burglaries, direct evidence connecting him to the crimes. Benny's next move was unexpected but brilliant. He deliberately knocked a small stone against the drain pipe, creating a noise that drew the guard outside to investigate. In the moment the door opened, the Penguin slipped inside, disappearing into the shadows. Did he just break and enter? Martinez whispered incredulously. Pretty sure Penguin actions fall into a legal gray area, Lisa responded. But her attention was focused on the scene unfolding inside. Through the window, they could see Benny moving silently behind storage boxes, his path taking him closer to the wall of evidence. The Penguin's small size and dark coloring made him nearly invisible in the dimly lit space. What's happening in there? Reynolds demanded over the radio. Sir, Lisa reported, our operative is gathering evidence using unconventional methods. Inside, Benny had reached the evidence wall. With careful movements, he used his beak to detach several key documents that had fallen within his reach. More importantly, his presence near a ventilation fan was causing loose papers to flutter, drawing Reeves' attention away from a small device that had been quietly downloading data from his laptop. Got it, Martinez whispered, checking his tablet. The signal booster we planted picked up their whole network. Emails, plans for tomorrow, everything. Reeves' voice carried through the window again. Once we've dealt with the board members, we'll move on to Phase 2. The entire San Diego coastline will. A sudden noise from above cut him off. The security guard had returned, and with him were 2 more figures carrying equipment bags. Sir, Lisa radioed to Reynolds, we've got probable cause and then some, but our operative is still inside. Permission to create a distraction? Before Reynolds could respond, Benny made his move. The Penguin had gathered his evidence and now implemented an exit strategy that could only be described as audacious. He waddled directly into view, carrying what appeared to be their most damning documents. The room froze. Reeves stared in disbelief at the Penguin standing before him, critical evidence in his beak. Is that? One of the new arrivals started. The police Penguin, Reeves finished, his voice tight with anger. Get it? But Benny had already set his plan in motion. He dropped the papers, which were immediately caught in the ventilation fan's breeze, scattering them around the room. In the ensuing chaos, as the criminals scrambled to gather the flying documents, the Penguin made his exit through the same drain pipe he'd entered by. "Move in," Reynolds commanded, and the night erupted into action. Police units converged on the building from all directions, their timing perfect thanks to Benny's distraction. Lisa reached the basement in time to see Reeves attempting to delete files from his laptop, files that had already been copied to their secure server. The expression on his face when he realized he'd been outsmarted by a penguin was, in Lisa's professional opinion, priceless. As the suspects were led away and evidence was collected, Benny stood calmly beside Lisa's car, looking for all the world like he hadn't just pulled off one of the most unusual undercover operations in police history. "We're going to have to create a new category of warrant for you," Lisa told him, shaking her head in amazement. "But I'm not sure how to phrase probable cause by penguin in legal terms." The night of the Coastal Dynamics retreat arrived with perfect weather and heightened security. The Pacific Crest Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with elegant decorations, while undercover officers mingled with corporate executives and board members. Lisa, dressed in evening wear that concealed her tactical gear, positioned herself near the main entrance. Through her earpiece, she could hear periodic updates from the surveillance team. Benny, surprisingly, had been officially included in the operation, his presence explained away as part of the hotel's local wildlife appreciation theme. All access points covered. Martinez reported from his position at the security desk. Reeves's team had planned to trigger a system-wide failure, trapping everyone inside while they accessed the executive suites above. Reynolds' voice came through clearly. "Remember, we're not just preventing a theft. Based on the evidence Benny recovered, Reeves was planning something bigger. Stay alert." The penguin in question was currently entertaining guests near the seafood buffet, his natural charm providing perfect cover for his surveillance of the room. He seemed particularly interested in a group of older board members, including Sarah Johnson's grandmother, who were gathered near the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the current CEO announced, approaching the podium. "Before we begin our keynote address, I'd like to acknowledge some special guests." Lisa noticed Benny's sudden change in posture. The penguin's attention had shifted to a service door where hotel staff were wheeling in audio equipment. Something about their movements seemed off. "Martinez," Lisa whispered into her concealed mic, "run facial recognition on the AV team." Moments later, 2 hits. Former Coastal Dynamics employees, both with connections to Reeves. The pieces clicked into place just as Benny began moving purposefully toward the stage. These weren't just burglaries or corporate revenge. The evidence they'd recovered suggested something far more sinister. The equipment, Lisa realized, spotting subtle modifications to the speakers. "It's not just for sound." Her warning was cut off by a high-pitched tone that made several guests wince. The hotel's lights flickered, and security shutters began descending over the windows. Everyone remained calm. The CEO started, but his voice was drowned out by sudden feedback from the speaker system. That's when Benny made his move. The penguin launched himself onto the buffet table, sending shrimp cocktails flying as he slid across its length. His trajectory took him directly into one of the suspicious AV techs, knocking loose a device that clattered across the floor. "Signal jammer," Martinez confirmed through the radio. "They're trying to block communication with outside security." The room erupted into confusion as multiple things happened at once. The fake AV team moved to block the exits, revealing concealed weapons. The lights cut out completely, plunging the ballroom into darkness. And through it all, Benny's voice, an unexpected, clear sound that cut through the chaos. "Fascinating," one of Reeves's men said, training his weapon on the penguin. "All this time, we thought you were just a clever animal. But you're something else entirely, aren't you?" Lisa froze, her hand on her concealed weapon, as Benny stood calmly in the center of the room. The penguin's posture had changed completely. Gone was the playful waddle and charming head tilts. In their place was the bearing of a trained operative. "Project Sentinel," the man continued, addressing the stunned crowd. "A classified experiment in enhanced intelligence and covert operations. using animals that could move freely through human society without suspicion. Most subjects failed, but you escaped. Benny remained still, but his eyes tracked every movement in the room. The revelation hung in the air. Their penguin detective wasn't just unusually clever. He was part of a secret program, one that explained his tactical knowledge and investigative skills. "That's why you've been interfering with our operation," another voice called from the darkness. Reeves stepped into view, holding what appeared to be a specialized containment device. "You recognized our methods, because they came from the same program that created you." Lisa's mind raced, processing this new information. The detailed plans they'd recovered, the sophisticated security breaches. Reeves hadn't just been stealing from his former company. He'd been using stolen classified technology, the same technology that had apparently produced their penguin detective. "Sir," she whispered into her radio, "please tell me we have a protocol for this situation." Reynolds' response was dry. Funnily enough, Chun, they didn't cover Secret Agent Penguin at the Academy. The standoff stretched taut as Benny faced his would-be captors. The Penguin's secret was out, but something in his stance suggested this revelation was part of his plan. He'd led them here deliberately, using this confrontation to expose not just a corporate crime ring, but a deeper conspiracy. The question was, what would he do next? And how many more surprises did their remarkable team member have in store? The tension in the ballroom crystallized around Benny as he stood his ground. The revelation of his true nature had shifted the entire dynamic of the situation. No longer just a clever penguin, he was now revealed as something unprecedented, a highly trained operative in an unexpected package. "You've been interfering with more than just our local operation," Reeves continued, his containment device humming ominously. "Project Sentinel facilities across the coast have been reporting security breaches. That was you, wasn't it? Gathering evidence, building a case." Benny's response was to slowly reach beneath his honorary police badge with his beak, retrieving a small data device that had been concealed there all along. "Sir," Martinez's voice crackled through the radio, "that device is broadcasting directly to federal servers. Everything being said in this room is being recorded as evidence," Reynolds completed. "Our friend has been running a much bigger operation than we realized." Lisa watched as Benny activated the device with a precise movement. Suddenly, the ballroom screens flickered to life, displaying classified documents and surveillance footage. The images showed multiple facilities along the coast where animals were being trained for covert operations. It was never about corporate revenge, Lisa realized aloud. The burglaries, the security systems. You were using coastal dynamics as a cover to restart the project. Reeves's laugh was bitter. Project Sentinel was shut down because small-minded bureaucrats couldn't see its potential. But we proved it worked. He gestured at Benny. "Look at him, the perfect operative. Who would suspect a penguin of being a trained intelligence agent?" Sarah Johnson's grandmother stepped forward, her voice steady. "That's why you targeted our family specifically. We weren't just former board members. We were the ones who voted to stop funding the project's military applications." The screens continued cycling through evidence, financial records, classified memos, and most damning of all, footage of other animals being subjected to the enhancement procedures. Benny had been methodically building a case, not just against Reeves's theft ring, but against the entire illegal continuation of Project Sentinel. "You don't understand what's at stake," one of Reeves's men growled, moving closer with his weapon raised. The program's success rate was minimal. He's one of the only subjects that survived the complete enhancement process. If we could study him, replicate those results. That's when Benny made his final move. With lightning speed, he slid across the floor, his trajectory taking him between the armed men. In the confusion, Lisa and her team sprang into action, their weapons drawn. "Federal agents, everyone down!" New voices called as additional operatives emerged from among the party guests. The operation was bigger than just the local police. Benny had coordinated with multiple agencies, using his position at the precinct as just one part of a larger investigation. In the ensuing chaos, Reeves tried to activate the containment device, but Benny was faster. The penguin executed a perfect flip that would have been impossible for a normal bird, knocking the device from Reeves's hands. I think, Lisa said, securing Reeves's wrists with handcuffs. He's made his choice about being studied. As federal agents secured the scene and guests were safely evacuated, Benny returned to his place beside Lisa. His bearing was different now. No need to maintain the pretense of being just a clever penguin, but still carrying himself with the same dedication to justice that had marked his time with the department. Reynolds approached, shaking his head in amazement. So, all this time, we had a highly trained federal operative on our force. He looked at Benny with new understanding. I don't suppose you can fill out your own paperwork now. Benny's response was a familiar head tilt, but now they recognized it as the calculated gesture it had always been, a way of maintaining his cover while carrying out his mission. What happens now? Lisa asked, watching as federal agents collected the classified equipment and documents. A senior federal agent joined them, addressing Benny directly. That's up to him. The project has been exposed, the illegal operations shut down. His mission is technically complete. The room fell quiet as all eyes turned to Benny. The Penguin looked around at the precinct team, at Lisa, Reynolds, Martinez, and all the others who had become not just colleagues but friends. Then, deliberately, he tapped his honorary badge. I think, Lisa smiled. He's saying he already has a job. Reynolds sighed, but he was smiling too. Well, I suppose having a highly trained operative on the force isn't the worst thing, even if he does technically qualify for fish instead of donuts at briefings. The evening wrapped up with federal agents escorting Reeves and his team away, while local officers cataloged evidence from both the corporate theft ring and the illegal project sites. Benny supervised it all, no longer needing to hide his tactical knowledge and training. As the last of the suspects were led away, Lisa found herself standing with Benny on the hotel's beach-facing balcony. You know, she said, you could have told us the truth at any time. We would have understood. Benny looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw the same dedication, intelligence, and yes, friendship that had made him such an invaluable partner, regardless of his origin. Although, she added with a laugh, the paperwork on this case is going to be absolutely ridiculous. The Penguin's responding gesture might have been a shrug, but it carried all the professionalism and subtle humor they'd come to expect from their most unusual team member. Enhanced intelligence or not, Benny had become an essential part of their police family, and that perhaps was the greatest undercover success of all. As the sunrise painted the sky over San Diego, Benny and Lisa watched the waves roll in. They had solved more than just a series of burglaries. They had exposed a conspiracy, shut down an illegal operation, and in the process, discovered that sometimes the best partners come in the most unexpected packages. Benny adjusted his badge, ready for whatever case would come next. After all, San Diego's first penguin detective still had work to do.